Hello, I'm Justin and I'd like to ask you a question. Do your drawings come together the way that you expect? Or do you sometimes find that they start well, but then you get into an area where you have a problem and you don't know how to solve it? Well, don't worry, you're not alone. Many of us have had this problem, and I'd like to show you some things that can really help you solve your problem. In this video, I'm going to share with you 6 things that can help you really catapult your drawing to a whole nother level. But before I get into that, leave me a comment below and tell me what area of drawing do you think you have the biggest problem with. What I want to talk to you about today is the elements of design. Now, this is a series of 7 or 8 elements, depending on who you talk to, that are fundamental building blocks of the drawings that you create. Now, today I want to talk to you about 6 of them. The first element I want to talk to you about is line. Now, line is super important to you in drawing. Do your action figures look like they're leaping across the room to punch the bad guy? Or do they look more like they're just toppling over and falling asleep? If that's the case, then you've probably got an issue with line. Now, line can convey so much meaning in the type of drawing that you're doing, depending on the type of line that you're using. Some of the different lines include vertical lines, horizontal lines, diagonal lines, curving lines, wavy lines. The list goes on and on. I'm not going to talk about them all today. What I want to tell you is that if you understand and get a good grip of what the different line types are and how they work, that will really help you create either stability or dynamic or action or movement in your drawings. An example of this is a strong diagonal line in your drawing creates a sense of impermanence. It creates a sense of something moving, something changing, something about to happen. It adds drama. Whereas if you put a very strong horizontal line in your drawing, that creates feelings of being stable and of being static and probably of being old. Changing the line really changes your drawings. And so I encourage you to try this out. If you'd like to know more, as always, there's information available on my website, justindwyer.art. The second element is all about shape. Now, are you having problems getting your drawings to look like the thing that you're trying to draw? Well, if so, it's probably a shape problem. Shapes are simply what an object looks like. If you imagine an apple, you can draw an outline of an apple and then you've got the shape of an apple. If you never get that shape correct in the first place, no matter what you do after that point, nothing will ever make it look like an apple again. Fixing a broken apple shape is quite easy. But how about something more complex? Let's think about a rose. You might think that a rose has quite an easy shape to draw. It's more or less a circle, isn't it? But if you actually look at all the different petals, there are so many different small shapes in there. We have many, many complex shapes making up one big simple shape. Now our problem is much harder. So how do you do it? Well, you start simply and you work your way up to the harder shapes. And that's the simple way to do it. You start with a simple, easy shape that you can draw, and then you start to add in more and more details to help you build up the complexity that you're looking for. And while it's not easy, it will take time and practice, just like everything else that you do in drawing. If you focus on shapes, you'll start to become much more accurate in your drawings. And the third element I want to talk about is value. Do you have a problem with getting weird perspective in your drawings? Have you drawn some distant mountains, but somehow they look like they're closer than the field that you've drawn in front of them? This is probably a value problem. Value is simply how dark or light something is. Something is very light, we would call it a high value. If something is very low in light, we would call it a low value. It's very dark, like a deep shadow. Light reflects off every surface that it interacts with, and that's how you can see it. And we can rank those from very high to very low, and we call that values, and you might even put it in a scale. There's a lot to be said about values. Way too much for this video today. But let me put it to you like this. If there's something wrong with your drawing and you can't put your finger on it, 9 times out of 10, it's going to be a values problem. But here's an exercise that you can try that will help you right now. Squint your eyes a little bit. Just shut them a little bit so that everything gets a little bit blurry. And then once everything's a little bit blurry, all you can really see is shapes and light. The light that you can see will be high, medium or low. You can see a bright thing, a middle sort of area, and then something is quite dark. And you can break your values down into those three fields. Start looking at things in that way and trying to use that in your drawing. And I believe that that will help you to start to see values in all the things that happen around you in your world and in your life, and more importantly, in your drawing. The fourth element I want to talk about is form. Are your drawings looking flat? If your drawing looks flat, then it's a form problem. What is a form? A form is a three-dimensional shape. So a shape has two dimensions. It has width and height. A form has three dimensions. It has width, height, and depth. Now, how can you create a three-dimensional shape on a two-dimensional sheet of paper? The way to do that is to use an optical illusion. And how do we create the optical illusion? Well, we're going to go back to our old friend value, because value is one of the best ways we can use to create that optical illusion. You remember I just talked about light and shadow? Well, that is the best way we can describe the depth component of our forms. As the light hits something, it creates a shadow. And if you can learn to see those and then learn to pick the values correctly, that's a really good way to start to create forms and depth in your drawings. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is space. Now, do your drawings contain rooms that look like they get bigger as they get further away? You've probably got a space problem. Now, space can quite simply be defined as a three-dimensional form in which the objects of your drawing are contained. So what I mean by that is, in this room, you can see there's some walls behind me. That's a space. It's a three-dimensional form. It's an area that has a width, a height, and a depth. And I'm inside the room, and so I'm an object inside a space. While there's a few different tools that you can use to create space, a lot of them are actually grouped together under the title of perspective. And while there are different types of perspective, one of the types of perspective that you can utilize actually relies on our old friend value once again. We go back to value in understanding the way that light works. If you look at something far away, and go try this for yourself, go outside and look at the furthest thing away that you can see, and note the characteristics of that thing. You'll note that it's not very sharp, it's not very clear, and depending how far away it is, it may actually even be hard to define from the sky or the area around it. If you look at something much closer, it's sharp and it's clear, and you can see it very clearly. You can see a lot of details, and you can utilize this in your artwork to create depth in your spaces. That makes things be further away and things be closer. Now, that's one tool that you can use. There are many others, but that's a great starting point. So the sixth element I want to talk about today is texture. So, are you putting everything else together correctly, but then you're finding it hard to really bring that last layer of detail in to really make your drawing pop? Well, then you've got a texture problem. Texture is quite simply all the fine details that you can see around you. Now, a good way to really start to understand texture is to think about how an object would feel if you were to touch it. If you draw something sharp and spiky, then the chances are, if you look at it and really put yourself into that drawing, you'll get a tactile sensation. You'll feel it in your hand. You'll start to feel what those prickles might feel like. It can actually put a shiver up your spine. If you do a drawing of something very soft, for example, a kitten or a puppy, what do you then want to do? You'll get a tactile sensation in your hand again because you want to go and pat that puppy or that kitten. That's texture. But how do you create that in your drawing is by thinking in your mind about the type of surface that you're actually interacting with. Is it hard and shiny? Is it soft and fabric? Is it sharp and prickly? Think about those things and just think about the type of lines that you can use to help you create those things. Line is your friend when you're going to create texture. Now, these 6 fundamental elements of design are critical to every artist. You need to understand them and be able to use them to your advantage to create the drawings that you want to create. If you want to know more, hit the subscribe button now. There will be more videos coming in the upcoming weeks, and you will learn more if you stay with me. The other thing that you can do right now to start improving your drawing is go to justindwyer.art. I have more resources available. Check them out and see if they help you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.